Of all the games I used to play in my younger, wilder days, the game of clubs and tees had never crossed my mind. But after some discussion with my closest, dearest friends, I decided that I'd give it one good try. But that was my first big mistake.
Welcome into the Turn Fantasy Golf Podcast. It is my pleasure to welcome on from 5-Star Preps, Jesse Smithy. Jesse, how you doing today?
Doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm so happy you could be able to come on and just tell a little bit about your story. And, especially reason I reached out to you is because just from following you on social media, it was easy to pick up that you're a huge golf nerd. And that's what we're about on this podcast. We want to talk about anything and everything golf, experiences, who you've met, who you've talked to. So first of all, Jesse, just tell us a little bit about yourself. What is 5-Star Preps and what's your journey look like?
Yeah, so I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, back in 1979 and grew up in a little small town in West Tennessee called Humboldt, about 10 minutes north of Jackson, Tennessee, and came to school at University of Tennessee in 1997. That was Peyton's senior year, and graduated from UT in May of 2002 and got lucky, got my foot in the door over at the Knoxville News Sentinel in August of 2002 and just stayed there a long time, worked my way up the chain and covered a lot of high school sports, a little bit of college sports, a lot of golf through the years over at the Knoxville News Sentinel. And then 2014 is, as you know, the newspaper industry kind of took a nosedive, and me being in my mid 30s and at the time having two really young kids, I figured I needed to try to start a new career for myself, and just happened upon this synthetic turf company here in Knoxville called Playwright, and do a lot of cool synthetic turf golf projects and football fields and lawns, and just it was a new world for me, but figure I could probably put my sports network to use a little bit with that. And so from 2014 until now, working with Playwright. But a few years ago, I was approached by a few businessmen here in Knoxville that really wanted to start a new media company for high school sports, just because the landscape of media had changed so much over the last 5 or 6 years since I left the newspaper, and there was nowhere to go to find scores and box scores and just the old school elements of media that people in their 30s, 40s, 50s were used to, but also blended in with the new elements, your videos, your podcasts, your social media that your teens and your 20-year-olds were used to. So we kind of brainstormed for a few months, and in May of 2018, we debuted 5StarPreps.com, and we cover about 70 high schools in the greater Knoxville area, all the way up to Greenville area, down to McMinn County, up to Campbell County, as far west as Crossville. So pretty large coverage map, and we hit home pretty hard on football, but cover every other sport under the TSSAA umbrella as well. And that's been going strong for almost 3 years now. So the subscriber base is growing, the sponsorship level is growing, and it's really cool to see Knoxville embrace us, even though we're new, so to speak. A lot of our writers and myself and photographers, we've been around for about 2 decades. So we know the schools, we know the coaches, we know the players, we know the communities. And so 5-Star Preps is just that vehicle to allow us to do what we love to do.
Yeah, and we'll talk a lot about this 5-Star Preps project you've got going. But first of all, moved here in 97, man. What a great year. What a great year to move to Tennessee and say, man, I think I want to be here forever. But little did you know that would be the pinnacle of your.
Yeah. I mean, I even wrote a column about it, about how spoiled I was back in college, how spoiled we all were. And I think we all took it for granted a little bit, right? I mean, the football team was winning SEC championships and in the mix at the time in all the BCS models and projections and rankings, and the women's basketball team winning national titles under Summit, and the men's basketball team was turning around at that point, and the baseball team was going to the World Series, and the track team was doing, I mean, it was just the high of highs for UT sports, and I relished every bit of it. I came to UT in 97 thinking I was going to be a pre-med major just because it sounded good. And I got that first class sheet after I registered, and I was like, biology, chemistry. I was like, what is all this? I don't want to do this. I knew pretty early that I was just like, I'm already changing majors. And so all the while I was at UT, I just kind of meandered around classes, still made good grades, and then I just happened to stumble upon a journalism class, and I was like, you know what? I've always loved sports. I picked my college based off of like I wanted a great sports atmosphere when I went to college, and so I just kind of married the two together and said, hey, let's give this a try with journalism and sports, and it just happened to work out.
Yeah. So like, did that success early on in Knoxville probably like steer you that direction more than anything, or is it really just the how hard that being pre-med was going to be?
Yeah, well, it's crazy. It's like I graduated third in my class coming out of high school, and so an academic challenge wasn't too daunting for me. It was just I could just envision myself being in those biology classes and chemistry classes, and I just I didn't want to do it. And so, like I said, I just kind of I tried business management and all this other stuff, and I finally, like I said, just kind of happened my way into a journalism class. And at the time, I wanted to be around sports somehow, and I had to be around sports somehow for me to feel happy about what I was doing. And little did I know that doing journalism somewhere down the line would make me feel rewarded in what I do, like intrinsically. Writing a feature story on a player, whether it's overcome some great obstacle or sickness, or just telling great stories. I didn't know that would make me feel good, make those kids and their families feel good. So it's just I don't know, it just kind of all worked out in just see God's hand in it all, really.
Yeah, we talked a little before we came on that we just started this show, the Turn Fantasy Golf Podcast, back last May. Really
Mhm.
in the midst of the coming off the pandemic. Hey, let's just do something,
Mhm.
and like you said, it's weird like creating this content level, regardless of if it's just for you. I mean, it gives you some kind of fulfillment. I don't know,
Right.
completion, or I don't know what it is, but you're right. Dopamine's getting released, but yeah, it's fun. It's fun coming up, scrambling. Right before you came on, I'm changing a dirty diaper over here, and washing out her clothes in the sink, and
Right.
the middle one trying to get ice water, and she got the water valve stuck and it's spraying it. That's right when I hit send on the link. So I mean, this
Yeah.
home journalism thing is not what it's all cracked up. It's not
Oh
all
yeah.
guts and glory like you hear on Friday night,
Yeah.
right?
We my daughter, my firstborn, at the time, I thought that I could handle her and write from home and cover all these other things. This was back in 2008, so I'll never forget having to take her in as an infant in a baby carrier to a football coach hiring a press conference, and so I'm walking in there with my carrier with my daughter in it, just hoping she doesn't cry or anything like that. And so I'm right there with you. I've had a kind of some crazy moments with my kids in journalism too.
Yeah. So in that time period at this new Sentinel, were you on the radio rotation at all from the 10 to 12?
I was, yeah. Dave Hooker came on board there in the mid 2000s, and he covered a lot of recruiting. And the New Sentinel had hired him to not only do recruiting, but to kind of usher in this new wave of media that was starting to come about. And one of the byproducts of that was the New Sentinel sports page on the Sports Animal. And so I had no experience with radio. I was really nervous to do radio. As a writer, you can think about what you want to say and hit the delete button and make it sound perfect. And with radio, you're live, you got one shot more times than not. I mean, yeah, there are taped radio programs and things like that. So it took me probably a couple of years, man, to really get comfortable in front of a mic and to be able to articulate myself in a way to construct my points and my opinions and do that in a concise manner. And sometimes fill dead air when you needed to fill dead air and filibuster a little bit. So there were so many little tricks of the trade that we all learned from Dave Hooker, and I think he's doing some stuff like that down in Chattanooga now. But I've told him this before. I was like, man, he was a pro's pro in radio, and just it came naturally to him. And we were all writers working alongside him. We just kind of watched what he did and try to mimic it. So uh, that was that was just kind of a new little thing that I learned to do. And as journalists coming up now have learned coming through college, you're not just a writer anymore. You have to be on TV, you have to be on radio, you have to do podcasts, you got to do blogs and do your own videos and make your own videos. So there's no such thing as just a writer anymore.
Yeah. I remember Dave Hooker. I think he's a Powell boy, and he's a Powell High
He is.
grad. Yeah,
Yeah,
he got
he
a
is.
he's got his PhD like me, Powell High diploma. So
That's right.
yeah, yeah, I've heard him tell the story about there's a guy that went to Powell. I don't know if you've ever heard this story he told, but 90 maybe 91 JV game. We're playing Virginia Military Academy or whatever, and they come down and do a JV game, and Hooker's like a freshman or whatever. I can't remember when it is, maybe 90, 91. And they trot out Heath Schuler out there in the non-tackle jersey, and I guess the JV scrimmages back then, there's full games except they had a no tackle scrimmage. Basically, it's two-hand touch with that guy,
Mhm.
and they bring out Heath Schuler out there on the field, and he's supposed to be the next coming great quarterback at Tennessee, under Johnny Majors. And first play from scrimmage, he takes like a 5-step drop and blindside, back crack Preston Littlejohn from Powell High School, hit him, fumbled. They bring the ambulance out. They're scared to death. I don't know if you ever heard that story, but
No, I
so
haven't.
you could hear the air gasp
No.
out of the whole Neyland Stadium
I
back then.
wish they still did JV games though. I remember them back in the mid to late 2000s. They tried to have like was it Hargrave Military? You remember came
Yeah,
down and
yeah, but
played. I wish they still did that, but I know it's hard because of the scholarship numbers. But there's so many great players that maybe even from this area that never get to touch the field at Tennessee, and seeing how football crazed this state is and Knoxville is, I guarantee you there'd be a good drawing. If you a good attendance if you had a JV game at Neyland Stadium like on a Thursday night or something. It'd be awesome.
yeah, well, I know one of the issues was it was whenever Kiffin was here, I think they did it. And one of the
Yeah.
issues was that it burnt red shirts if you play in the JV game,
Okay.
which was that's a crazy rule to me, but whatever. But yeah, so speaking of, since I know this is a golf podcast, but we're in Knoxville, Tennessee.
That's right.
What are you thinking, man? I mean, okay, you were here. How long did you work at the New Sentinel? You said
From '02 to 2014.
okay,
So I
so
was there when I was at Neyland Stadium the night Fulmer coach's last game, and I was in the New Sentinel the night Kiffin resigned. So I've kind of seen it all.
okay, there you go. So you've seen all that. You sat on press row up there and up in the skybox at Neyland Stadium. I've been up there. It's pretty cool, pretty fun. So, what are you thinking? First of all, from a sports perspective, is it salvageable? Yeah, are we looking for a long 10-year road? What are we looking at?
Oh, yeah. It's hard. We don't really know the candidates right now for this job, and Danny White, the new AD at Tennessee, has done a remarkable job in kind of throwing off the media following. And I know everybody's trying to track airplanes, and we don't know if some of that is smoke screened or not. But is it salvageable? Yes, with the right hire, but also with the right coaching staff. And I think that's been a majority of the problem when you look back over the last few years. Some of the assistant coaches I just haven't been too keen on, and for a new coach to come in, especially like Jeremy Pruitt, who's never been a head coach before, he's learning on the fly. You got all these new coaches come in that he thinks he feels comfortable with, but it takes a long time to kind of work those kinks out and learn like who can work well with whom and who's recruiting is doing better than who's the other guys on the staff. So was 3 years quick? Maybe. I don't know, but it's all got to line up perfectly. I think for it to really pop off for Tennessee. Otherwise, it might be another 3, 5, 6 years until you can find the right combination for your coaching staff and get the recruits in there.
Yeah, I definitely thought with Pruitt, and I know this is a golf podcast. We're getting on Tennessee college football a little bit, but I definitely thought in that situation, he had a lot of strikes against him
Mhm.
publicly, with the quarterback situation and
Right.
and then saying one thing and then doing the other, or standing by one thing and then finally giving in to what the riders and the fans wanted, and along with that, and then what we thought was an uptick in success, and then total demise. When it was bad, it was really bad. When it was
Yeah.
good, it was pretty good, but when it was bad, it was really bad. So
It's it's such a huge transition from coordinator to head football coach. I mean, if we're on a podcast, that's like being a really successful web.com tour or Corn Ferry tour as it's known now, and going up and trying to win a major in your first couple of years. I mean, it's that big of a jump to try to take that success and hit it on the big time in the SEC, it's hard and it's all got to line up. I mean, he started to get some good recruits, but the depth maybe necessarily wasn't there, especially on defense. And everybody knows you got to have a lot of depth on defense in the SEC. And so, yeah, it was. I'm sure he learned a lot of lessons that if he could do it over again, he'd do it differently. And that comes with the territory when you hire a first-time head coach.
Yeah, exactly. So moving into the 5-star preps, you said you had some, guys come to you, and I know obviously that writing and just covering sports in general is a passion of yours. What was kind of the selling point? Was it kind of like, hey, I can get back into this at least at some part time, maybe even full time one day? Was that kind of the vision for you going into it?
Well, I was still doing, even though I left the News Sentinel, I was still doing a lot of media freelance work just in case I ever wanted to get back into it, because I took a big leap to leave journalism, which was what I had done my entire professional career, and basically got into a sales role with Turf. And so I kind of kept one foot in the waters with media just in case, I needed to go back into it. And so I was still covering a lot of high school sports in East Tennessee and around the state, really, over a 4-year span. And so when these guys came to me, they said, "Hey, this is what we're doing," and I was like, "Well, if I'm going to really do something, it's got to be awesome. It can't just be half-hearted. It can't be just a small little blog and hope that we hit it big. If I'm going to take this risk and start my own website, a pay website, which has never been done in high school sports, at least in Tennessee, then we got to make a grand entrance. We got to blow people's heads off and say, I got to subscribe to this website. I got to see what this is about. Why is this content better than what I can get elsewhere? And so for that first year, we really had to do that. And I think we did that. And so we started to see our subscription spike and our sponsors come on board more and more. Once they saw what we were about and the level of quality journalism we tried to bring to East Tennessee.
Yeah, I had Darren Reese on. I don't know if you know him at
I
all,
do know
but
there.
okay, so director of marketing for the TGA, and he said, before he goes in journalism as well, from Greenville Sun down to moving into the TGA position, and he was just saying that he was, after looking at other golf associations around the state, around the surrounding states, it's like, man, Tennessee does a lot more for junior athletes, just in golf now. And then what you're saying is, I feel over the last few years that Tennessee is, especially the Knoxville area, has gotten more recognition nationally. I mean, it obviously helps when you got a team like Maryville that wins, 70 something straight games, or a team like Alcoa or a Fulton that's putting guys D1 sports every year. I mean, I think as a whole, athletically, I mean, the amount of baseball talent that's come out of East Tennessee in the last 20 years is crazy. And the amount of, and now we're seeing like we have future PGA Tour players
Yeah.
playing junior golf in Knoxville right now easily.
Yeah. So when I started covering golf at the newspaper was right around 2005. And so your Wes Roaches, your David Holmes, guys like that were really starting to come. Your Peter Malnati's, your Jonathan Hodges were coming out. And so there was a strong wave at that point where you could tell there were going to be 3 or 4 guys that really had a chance to make it on the PGA Tour. And then it snowballed from there. I mean, with Davis Shore coming through Knoxville, of course, he's at Alabama and been one of the better junior players in the country coming out of high school. And you got Cottom over at Clemson, who played at Catholic, and a number of players on Tennessee's roster who are from East Tennessee. And what guys like Brad Rose have done teaching these guys and bringing them up, and Jake Reeves, just tip my hat to them. I mean, they've taken these players and turned them into golfers who can not only compete at the state level, but go outside the state borders and win AJGA events, or at least get on that first page of the leaderboard of AJGA events, and get on college rosters outside of the state.
Exactly. Yeah. And another thing to that is that I had Scott on last week, and we talked about, I went off to college, I come back, and there's like 15 of you guys can break par there,
Right.
like juniors now. I'm like, where does this come from? And I still say that's like it's before your time, or no, right around your time, but like, that was like the strongest, like depth wise field, but I definitely see some like next level talent. Brian Hall, or
Mhm.
his son Ryan Hall is playing at South
Mhm.
Carolina. I think he's a top 100 amateur in
Yep.
the world.
Mhm.
I mean, we're seeing next level talent. People, main thing is the kids aren't scared to go out there and compete nationally.
Mhm.
And I think part of what you're doing has got to be helping that from a standpoint of giving them exposure, not only locally, but regionally and even nationally at times.
Yeah, and I mean what Darren Reese is doing at the Tennessee Golf Association. Here, the thing about Darren, and I've worked alongside Darren for a number of years, and I've been able to see his work from my vantage point, being in the Knoxville market. And I knew this when he was in Greenville, is that he loves the kids and he loves to showcase the kids or the athletes that he's covering, and do it in a personal way, not this kind of a not kind of a cold, kind of standoffish way that sometimes you get in journalism. He really invested himself time wise into these people's lives, and so it came through in his product. And so when he got hired at the Tennessee Golf Association, I mean, no brainer. I mean, I knew people were going to love him and love what he was going to do. The content that he could produce with his camera and his video and layout and graphics. I mean, I saw him winning awards all the time in Greenville. So that was going to be an instant hit, and it has been. And he's doing great things over there. And then what we do, we cover high school golf. We have our own 5-Star Preps Masters in late July every year at Oak Ridge Country Club, and been at Tennessee National as well. And we try to get all the best high school golfers in our market and their teams to come and compete over 2 days. And there's an old tournament that used to be in Knoxville, the Prep Masters, I believe. And so we tried to refurbish that a little bit and rebrand it with our brand and have fun with it. So it's hard. As you know, those elite players, some of those guys that you've named and girls that you named, they're off playing these big time events out of state. So we work really hard to try to get our tournament to mesh with their schedule and make sure that they're there. And we've been able to get a few so far. But when we do, I mean, you see that talent level. It's insane. I mean, kids going out shooting 5, 6, 7 under. It's wild to me. It wasn't like that when I played high school golf. In the early to mid '90s, you shot around par, maybe 1 or 2 under. I mean, you were a solid player, better than solid player. And of course, the Tiger era ushered in a new way of preparation and training from a physical standpoint and golf teaching standpoint and mental standpoint.
Yeah, I say growing up for us, if you had a metal driver, you were a solid player. Much
Oh
less.
yeah, I can remember going to junior tournaments and being intimidated because somebody had a Callaway Big Bertha in their bag. I'm like, oh, look at that guy. Here I am with my persimmon woods and whatnot. And so it was definitely a weird transition for us all to kind of grow through. And you mentioned, going off to college and coming back and seeing all those guys kind of pop off. I mean, that's what I saw. I mean, I started covering golf right around that time, and started getting introduced to Scott Stallings and covering his career from right around the time where he turned pro. I'll never forget. I was at my hotel room in Augusta, and I'm not trying to humble brag here, but I'll never forget getting a call from him telling me that he's going pro and writing an article about him while I was in my hotel room in Augusta back in 2006. Uh, and writing that story and following his career and learning more about him, that here was a guy coming out of high school that he was a solid player, right? I mean, but he didn't win state championships and state tournaments. I mean, I went back and looked at those leaderboards. He was, maybe in the top 25. He shot in the low to mid 70s, but nothing signaled, hey, that's going to be the guy that's going to win 3 PGA Tour events and have an extended career on the PGA Tour. And then conversely, you got guys like Peter Malnati, who won state championships, and then he comes back and he's at Missouri. He comes back home, and you watch that guy up against your Wes Roaches and David Holmes and Jonathan Hodges, and you don't necessarily pinpoint Peter Malnati as a guy who's going to go on to the PGA Tour and win, but those guys' will and their drive, it just keeps pushing them to get better and better and better. And I use their stories all the time for my daughter, who's in competitive dance, and I'm like, yeah, look at that girl. Right now she might be winning everything. You might finish runner up, but look at Scott Stallings. She knows Scott Stallings because I covered him and talked about him. I was like, look at his career. he wasn't winning everything, but he kept pushing and pushing and pushing and getting better and better and better and improving. And eventually he probably surpassed a lot of those guys that he played with as a teenager. And now look at him. So it's both of those guys. It still baffles me they're able to do what they do on the PGA Tour and sustain that career, because as you know, the influx of players coming into pro golf every year just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and they're better and they hit it farther and they're just more and more skilled. And yet here are those two guys from East Tennessee, kind of underdogs, that are making a living out there.
Yeah, I didn't tell this whenever I didn't tell him this story, and I've got to tell him to him one day that. But you know, I work in like a very blue collar job, and so people all know I play like 8 to 12 rounds a year probably now,
Mhm.
maybe, and you know,
Same, yeah.
3 of them are scrambles, 8 of them are competitive, and 1 like round for fun.
Yeah.
You know, whether it be like a 2-man tournament, or I try to play in 1 state event a year if I can
Okay.
qualify. So, but anyway, so it's either really good or really bad when I play.
Yeah.
I tell you that. So, but I tell people know I used to play competitive. They knew that I played in college. So they're like, hey, do you know, of course, Scott's name always gets brought up. Do you know Scott Stallings? And I say, yeah, I used to pummel him in high school. But then I never tell him that I was 2 years older than him, you know, and he was like a sophomore when I was a senior.
Yeah.
But no, but what to saying that, yeah, I remember Scott. So there was a guy at Oak Ridge, like it was my age. So he was the 1 player. Scott was the 2 at the time. So Scott played with a couple guys younger than me most of the time. I don't even know if I've ever actually played a hole of golf with him, to be honest with you. Uh, but yeah, I remember coming back after my sophomore year, his senior year summer, and there was something different from the standpoint that he could hit it a very long ways.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know if you remember this, but like 03 or 13 or see here. So he made the tour, what, in 11?
2011. Yeah.
Yeah, made the tour in 11, finished, you know, won the Greenbrier in 11. I'd say like 2012, 2000. He was probably like the 5th longest driver in the world. People don't understand that. Like,
Yeah.
you had like Bubba, DJ, Gary Woodland, and then probably him.
Yeah.
I mean, he was hitting it 3. Like, I remember senior year in college, him hitting it like, you know, I was hitting like driver, see your driver 3 wood in the holes. He's hitting driver 4 iron. You know, I mean, and
Mhm.
I don't hit it I don't hit it short at all. So,
Mhm.
I mean, we're talking like 5th longest driver in the world back then. And that I noticed that right away. Like, we played in maybe the Holston Hills Invitational, and he was a few holes behind. I think he shot like 5 under that day or something. And I was saying, like, man, he's hit that driver like 50 yards past where I hit mine today. You know, so that from a perspective. Then he got on here. He said himself last week when on our podcast that his after his sophomore year in college, I think, or maybe after his freshman year in college, he started working with Brad Rose, and they got after it like every day, like
Mhm.
every week, and like set goals and talked about it. And then, honestly, knowing him the way I, you know, it just I'm very good friends with 2 of his close friends, Jason Gandy and Ryan Greer, and
Mhm.
so talking to them that talk to him a lot, I just ask little small questions, but you know, this whole new health movement has just made his game more hungry, you know, while he's out there and driving to be better as a person, be better as a golfer, be better as individual. So it's quite inspiring, honestly. You know, you be around him, it makes you want to, you know, do good things, run through brick walls,
Yeah.
stuff like that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you see his work ethic and his drive. What I was talking about, you see it manifest itself on social media now with how he pushes himself to be better physically. And I think anytime you're around somebody like that, it's gonna kind of sprinkle off on you a little bit. You're gonna get a little bit of that, and the more you're around people like that, you're gonna start pushing yourself and be inspired by what he's done. And just kind of going back to his length. I mean, you're right. I was covering him at the 2011 PGA Championship. Remember, he got that win at Greenbrier and kind of got into the field late at the PGA Championship. Was running on fumes because he had played so many weeks in a row, and down there covering it. And he let me inside the ropes during a practice round for 9 holes. He and Brad Rose were out walking 9 holes at Atlanta Athletic Club, and I forget, it was either number 2 or number 3, the long par 4. I mean, it's over 500 yards, and he did a driver just into the second cut of rough. Had I think like 205 in, in deep rough, and he pulls 7-iron, and I'm standing there next to him, 7-iron, and just blast it out onto the green. I mean, I'm sure he played a flyer or whatever, but to even pull 7-iron, I mean, was just mind-boggling to me that he could hit it that far and hit it onto the green, and he did it. And so I remember, my buddy coming down and during tournament week and telling him about Scott because he was a newcomer to Tennesseans really outside of Knoxville. And so my buddy from West Tennessee drives down and following Scott, and I'm like looking it up on my phone, PGA Tour statistics. I mean, he was like, 8 or 9 in the on the tour that season in driving distance. So that was a big key to his success early on.
Yeah, I agree. So following that, you said covered Augusta. You said humble brag. So how many times have you covered that down there? And second part of that question is if it's just one time or whatever. Tell me about that experience. And did you make the player raffle?
I did. My first year was 2006, so that was Mickelson's second Masters, and I went back in 2007, 2012 when Stallings qualified from his Greenbrier win. Went back in 13 and 14, and then after I left the Sentinel, wasn't able to go any longer, and then I was able to freelance it for the Detroit Free Press in 2018 and 2019. So I got to see Tiger finally win down there. So I got to see, Bubba Watson win twice, Zach Johnson's win, 2013, I believe that was Adam Scott. I wasn't there on the weekend though, but and then 2018 was Patrick Reed over Ricky Fowler, and then Tiger's win in 2019. So if I never get to go again, and I told my wife this and a lot of people this, getting to see that whole week and that Masters Sunday of Tiger Woods winning in 2019, I am fulfilled. I've spent more than 50 days down there as a journalist, I think, when you add it all up, and never took it for granted. I try to get out there as early as I could every day and stay until dark and just soak it all in, because you never know where you're going to get to go back.
Yeah. So like I said, did you make the player raffle?
I did, yeah. My very first year, which was crazy. I've been down there a number of years since, and like I told you, they have a raffle there on the weekend, and so they put all the players, whoever gets selected, up on this TV screen. And I hear journalists that come back to their seats saying, "I'm 0 for 28 now. I'm 0 for 18 now." They've been down there all those years and never got drawn in that media lottery. And for me to get selected on my very first year, I didn't know it at the time how lucky I was. I mean, I knew I was lucky to play Augusta, but I didn't know how lucky I was compared to other golf writers who've been trying for decades to get their names drawn. And so when I tell you I was nervous, I mean, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't eat breakfast that morning that I got to play. I was just so worked up and amped up. And that was my first round of the year. I mean, April, I hadn't hit a ball since October. And my first round of the year is going to be at Augusta, the day after Phil Mickelson won his second Masters. So my tee time was at 7:50 a.m. and I stayed in Columbia, South Carolina that week. So I had to drive about an hour and 15 minutes, and I'm worrying like, what if I get a flat tire? What if I get, this is early morning, what if somebody gets me in a fender bender on Washington Road and I can't make and I'm the goofball that missed his tee time at Augusta because something crazy happened. So I mean, I was a mental wreck before I could even tee off. I mean, they didn't let us use the range at that point. So I had to go to the 10th tee was my first hole of the day. So I had to go to the 10th tee, having not hit a ball in 6 months, and somehow try to find the fairway. And I did not. I did not. I've knocked it around the trees in 10 for a while, then finally got out in the fairway. And I don't know if you've ever stood halfway down the 10th hole at Augusta and looked at the green. It looks a million miles away, and it looks so small. And there's like that amoeba shaped kind of bunker out there, and just kind of playing with your mind. And so then I fanned a ball off into the azalea somewhere on the right, and I ended up making a 10 on number 10, my very first hole. And I'm like, well, it can't get any worse. And so I just kind of let it fly from there, and ended up having birdie putts on my next, I think, 3 holes, 11, 12, and 13, and I think 14 too. So my next 4 holes at Augusta. And so, yeah, it was just the first 9 holes. I'm just floating on air and just can't believe I'm there, and you're just in all of it, and your nerves are going wild. And then finally we made the turn to the front nine. I was able to calm down a little bit and just play golf. But it's an experience I'll never forget, and nothing's topped it since. And so there is a drawback a little bit. I mean, to having played Augusta, is like you go to some of these top 100 courses and it's just not the same. And it's hard to top that experience. And I think maybe St. Andrews could top it or get up there next to it. But or maybe playing Pine Valley someday or something. I doubt I'll ever get to play there, but it's hard to top what I experienced that day. I'll never forget it.
I don't exactly know how you feel, but we played Torrey a couple years back, and a lot of people that play Torrey, kind of throw shade on it. But man, my experience out there was, it's on, if you just take in what it is, it's on the side of a mountain. It's beautiful. There's a couple of really, really picturesque holes in the state park. And I don't know if you've ever been out there, but being in that little community, La Jolla community, just a lot of old money, the Rat Pack hung out down there. It's just a cool city, and playing there. And I played, obviously I played the honors course in Tennessee. That's more of a, if you could probably mesh those two together, it kind of, it's got the privateness of maybe Augusta has, but not necessarily the beauty. Right. And then, and plus you played Augusta the Monday after the Masters. That's the peak day to play it. Right. That's before they come in and tear up all the flower beds.
Well, no, they're tearing down while you're playing. So it's so funny. It's like, I'll never forget, I'm teeing off on 11 and there's this huge wooden spool that just comes like rolling across the middle of the fairway. Just somebody had let it loose accidentally and it's rolling. You never see something like that, the day before on Sunday. And so there's some banging and clanking going around. But it doesn't ruin your day. It's not impeding. You don't really even notice it. And what's amazing is, I try to tell people this when they were going to have the Masters this year without the patrons there, is like when we play the course and you're hitting shots into 6, into 9, into 18, those holes where patrons frame those greens, when they're not there, it just becomes this expansive piece of land, and the sight lines are so different. I'll never forget hitting into number 2 and feeling like there was no green depth there whatsoever, or hitting into 9 and just seeing how little that green looked. And whereas when you're watching it on TV, everything's perfectly framed by patrons and it just looks so easy to hit. And when they're not there, it's just it's totally different. And hopefully that people were able to see that a little bit this past Masters in November.
Yeah, like number 2 is probably that's the green's 40 yards long, and you're saying it looks tiny though from the fairway.
Well, yeah, I mean, you see the width of it, but the depth of it is just minimal at best, and the way the green is built. And even though I was hitting my approach shot from an elevation, kind of on a downhill, I just felt like I had nowhere to land the ball, and I was just like, how am I supposed to hit this downhill wedge shot off this turf that I'm afraid to hit because I know I'm going to mess it up, and land it on this green and have it do all. And it's just, like I said, man, it just kind of messes with your mind while you're there, because you're just so in awe of the place. And then it's greedy, and it sounds greedy, but I've always taken my clubs with me every time I go back, just in case. I'd love to have another shot at it, knowing that I don't think I'd be as intimidated that second time around. I think I could just play golf a little bit. I'd still be nervous, but I got to play it once, and that's more than anybody could ask for. So I'm not upset when I don't get my name drawn.
I got you. So you said you works with Playwright. I don't know, Playwright Sports. Is that what y'all call it, the company?
It's just Playwright. I mean, they do a little bit of everything, not just turf, but they'll build tennis courts and do all kinds of things. So it's just Playwright, and it's an awesome company, family owned, family run here in Knoxville since the mid 90s. And so yeah, we've been doing that for a while. About 5-6 years.
So I saw a little project y'all did down at Sweetens Cove for another podcast. You want to go into that at all, about how that came about?
Yeah. So, well, it kind of goes back to my early trips to Sweetens Cove. And reaching out to them, I think somewhere around 2016, 2017, maybe. Just up late scrolling on Instagram and saw this course, man, in Tennessee. I'd never seen anything like it, never. And I mean, at Golden Hour, you can make any golf course look good, look beautiful. I mean, my home course in West Tennessee, you take pictures when the sun's going down at 7 o'clock in the summertime, 8 o'clock, it's going to look fabulous. So I reached out to the guy and I was like, look, is this course real, or are these, pictures kind of tricks or whatever? He goes, no, man, come down and see it. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of a freelance golf writer. I'd love to come down and maybe do something on it. So I'll go down there and to Sweetens Cove, and they're going to let me play for free. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to buy some merch or eat some lunch in the clubhouse, or, do something to give a little bit of money back. And I pull up in this gravel parking lot, and there's a porta potty and some shed that looked like it's fresh out of a Home Depot. And I'm like, what, what is this? Where am I? And I go in the shed and there's no merchandise. I think maybe a few golf balls in a bowl. And there's this guy, Patrick, who's out vaping out on the porch. And I'm like, dude, what is this? And so I fell in love with the place that day. And I told him, I was like, look, if you guys ever need turf for anything, just, let me know. And eventually they needed some turf, and I developed a little bit of a working friendship with Rob Collins, who, helped design and build that course. And so he reached out to me, back during the quarantine, and said, hey man, the no laying up guys are building a house, or not building a house, but flipping a house kind of adjacent to number one green at Sweetens Cove. And they want to build this tee pad up there in front of the house so that guys at night, have a few drinks, kind of chill out, and hit some balls from this tee pad down onto number one green. And they need some turf for it. And I'm like, I watch No Laying Up. I'm a fan of what they do. And so, I was able to go down there, and we built a little tee pad for what they call the birdhouse, right there. If you've ever been to Sweetens Cove, get on number one green and you look across the road up the hill, and that's their house up there. And there's probably a 15 by 15 foot by 15 foot tee pad, synthetic turf, that it's kind of become this famous 10th hole, so to speak, at Sweetens Cove. People will drive their carts up there and hit a shot. I think it's like 105 yards, pretty significant elevation drop down to the green. And so, it's been cool to work alongside Sweetens Cove just a little bit and be a very, very, very small piece of their success. And I say very, very small. I'm talking about minuscule. Just being a part of them is fun to me. And we're actually going to be going up to the birdhouse for another little project here soon, for some putting projects, I guess you can say. And so, it's been kind of fun to work alongside those two entities that are making golf fun and bringing a new audience to the game.
That's why I think I continue to say over and over, golf is the best game ever. It means so many different things together: friendship, gamesmanship, smack talk, love of the game in general. I mean, there's nothing like being at a golf course at 6:30 in the summer evening, the sun starting to set or whatever, and just the deafening silence. I don't know if, just it's kind of spiritual in a way, but
It
hate
is.
to get all mushy about golf,
No,
but it's true.
No, totally get it. And it doesn't, like I was saying, man, it doesn't matter if you're at Sweetens Cove or Augusta or your Muni, your local Muni. When you're out there in the summertime and that heat finally kind of goes away and you're comfortable on the course, and like you mentioned, the sun setting, and it's just kind of the perfect weather, and it's calm and peaceful, and man, it's an awesome place to be. It is a spiritual thing, and I think there's a great spirituality to golf, and I think that's what draws a lot of people to it. Can make you a better person, and make friends with people maybe you weren't going to be friends with. And it's such a uniting type of sport. And to be able to go to a different city or state and go to some golf course there, and the next thing you know, you're friends with that person, or this couple you might meet. I mean, it's an amazing sport.
Yeah. And, talking about we are big on this podcast, especially me and my buddy Joe that hosts this. We're big on wanting to grow the game locally, from the basically the ground up, any way we can help out or whatever. So as far, I'm gonna speak for As the Turn fantasy group, we would love to help pitch in any way we can, or put more eyes on it, or even come out there and get our hands dirty whenever you have your next tournament this coming late summer. So
All right. Yeah, man, I appreciate that. Yeah, well, it'll be out in In Oak Ridge, sometime. I know we were talking about the dates of the other day, so we can get it penciled in or pinned in or sharpied in. We'll definitely reach out to you guys if we need some help.
Uh, I know I've helped run tournaments before. It's not the easiest thing in the world, and
No.
you're scrambled around at all times trying to get different sponsors and
Yep.
and tee times and players and confirmation and everything. So, Matt, first of all, I want to say I appreciate everything you do for golf locally and everything you're doing for Knoxville as far as helping junior sports and things like that. You're putting eyes on it. How do people find you, Jesse?
Yeah. So our website is 5StarPreps.com. You can spell out the number 5 or just type in the number 5. It's not hyphenated or anything like that. So 5StarPreps.com. You can find us on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, all on there doing all types of different content. So we're all over the place, and hopefully we put out some type of content that'll appeal to some of your listeners and your readers.
Good deal, man. Good deal. So from one golf nerd to another, man, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing some great stories. That's the best thing about having a podcast, just getting to hear people's stories,
Oh yeah,
proven
absolutely.
experiences.
Everybody's got a few stories and life stories, and it's fun to hear.
Yeah, exactly. One episode I will definitely point out on his podcast, if from a golf friend's perspective, I think you have a 2-part episode or maybe just one about the Michael Jordan coming to Knoxville and playing Dean Hill Country Club. Is that right?
Yeah, that
So
is. Yeah, we did that during quarantine when the Last Dance documentary was coming out. I knew that Jordan had been here, so I started reaching out to people for Michael Jordan stories, but I didn't know that story about him playing at Dean Hill with the pro there at the time. So that was fun to hear about.
good deal. Yeah, I will find that episode in his on the podcast app, and I will put link to it on ours below.
Awesome.
So once again, thank you, Jesse, for coming on,
Yeah, man.
and
Appreciate it.
absolutely, Jesse Smithy, 5StarPreps.com. You have listened to the Turn Fantasy Golf Podcast.
I've already hit 3 in the lake. It's gonna drive